Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Note That Changed Everything. Cole Mitchell had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years as a private investigator, 15 of those running his own firm, had taught him to notice the smallest details, a nervous twitch, a avoiding glance, the way someone's voice changed when they lied. But somehow, he'd missed the biggest deception of all, sitting right across from him at their favorite corner booth at Rosie's Diner. Tracy looked radiant tonight, her auburn hair catching the warm light of the restaurant's vintage fixtures. She'd suggested this place for their monthly date night, just like she had for the past 3 months. Cole had thought it romantic, his wife of 12 years wanting to rekindle their connection after a rough patch. Now, as he watched her check her phone for the 3rd time in 10 minutes, those investigative instincts he'd somehow suppressed at home began to stir. "Everything okay?" he asked, cutting into his meatloaf. "Of course," Tracy smiled, but her fingers drummed against the table. "Just work stuff?" Cole nodded, though something felt off. Tracy worked as a marketing coordinator for a small local firm, hardly the type of job that required constant evening emergencies. But he'd learned to pick his battles in their marriage, especially after the fertility struggles that had nearly torn them apart 2 years ago. The waiter, a thin Hispanic man in his 30s with kind eyes, approached their table with a water pitcher. Cole had noticed him watching their table more than usual tonight, but attributed it to good service. As the man refilled Cole's glass, his hand trembled slightly, sending water cascading across the table and directly onto Cole's lap. "So sorry, sir," the waiter exclaimed, his accent thick with genuine distress. "I'm so clumsy tonight." Tracy jumped up with an exaggerated gasp. "Oh no, your new shirt." The waiter, his name tag read Tony, quickly grabbed a handful of napkins from the dispenser and thrust them toward Cole. "Please, let me get more napkins from the back. I feel terrible." As Cole dabbed at his pants, he felt something crinkle inside one of the napkins. Paper. His fingers found a small, folded note. Training kicked in, and without looking, he palmed it smoothly while continuing to clean himself. "It's fine," Cole assured Tony, who still looked mortified. "Really, no harm done." "Are you sure? I can have the manager comp your meal." "That's not necessary." Cole forced a smile. "Accidents happen." Tracy had sat back down, but Cole noticed she'd angled herself slightly away from Tony, her shoulders tense. "Interesting. Well, if you're sure." Tony glanced between them nervously. I'll let you finish your meal in peace." As Tony retreated, Cole excused himself. "I'm going to clean up in the restroom. Order me the apple pie if he comes back." In the safety of the men's room, Cole unfolded the note with steady hands. The message was written in careful block letters. "Get away from your wife, now." Cole stared at the words, his mind racing. This wasn't a prank. Tony's fear had been real. But why? What did a stranger know about his marriage that he didn't? He returned to the table, his expression carefully neutral. Tracy was checking her phone again, typing rapidly. "Sorry about that," Cole said, sliding back into the booth. "You know what? I'm thinking we should head home early tonight. I'm not feeling great. Maybe something I ate." Tracy's head snapped up, and for just a moment, Cole saw something flicker across her face. "Relief? Are you sure? We haven't had our dessert." "I'll be fine. Let me just go settle the bill up front." At the register, Tony's hands shook as he processed the payment. The hostess had stepped away, leaving them alone. "What did you mean by that note?" Cole asked quietly. Tony's eyes darted toward the dining room, then back to Cole. I shouldn't have. Look, man, Hey." Cole's voice carried the authority he'd developed interrogating suspects. "Whatever you're scared of, I need to know. Now." Tony's resolve crumbled. "She's not who you think she is, okay? Every Tuesday for 3 months, she comes here with another guy. Same booth, same time you two were here tonight. They talk about you. About money. About other things." Cole's blood turned to ice. "What other things?" "Insurance policies. Bank accounts. And..." Tony swallowed hard. "How to make things look like an accident." The world tilted slightly. Cole gripped the counter to steady himself. "Are you sure it was my wife? Auburn hair, about 5 feet 6 inches, drives a silver Honda Accord with a dent in the rear bumper." Tony nodded toward the parking lot where Tracy's car sat under a streetlight, dent clearly visible. Cole's hands clenched into fists. 20 years of reading people, and his own wife had been plotting against him right under his nose. But the rational part of his mind, The investigator's instinct that had made him successful kicked in. He needed proof. He needed evidence. And most importantly, he needed a plan. The man she meets, Cole said. Describe him. Tall, blonde, always wears expensive suits. Drives a black BMW. They call him Ryan. Ryan. The name hit Cole like a physical blow. Ryan Hoffman, Tracy's old college boyfriend, who'd recently moved back to town. The same Ryan who'd been showing up at barbecues and dinner parties, always with a convenient excuse for why his latest girlfriend couldn't make it. The same Ryan who'd offered to help Cole refinance their mortgage just last month. Thank you, Cole said quietly, handing Tony a $100 bill. For the heads up and the meal. And Tony? You never saw me tonight. Tony pocketed the money with relief. Saw who? Instead of returning to Tracy, Cole walked out the front door and around to the side of the building. He called her cell phone. Hey babe, he said when she answered. I'm feeling really sick. I called an Uber home. Can you drive yourself? I don't want you to catch whatever this is. Of course, Tracy's voice was full of concern that now sounded fake to his ears. I'll be right behind you. But Cole wasn't going home. He was going to the police station, not to report a crime, not yet, but to see his old partner Detective Frank Morrison. Because if his wife and her lover were planning to kill him, they were about to learn that Cole Mitchell wasn't the easy target they thought he was. As he sat in the back of the Uber, watching Rosie's diner disappear in the distance, Cole felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. The man who'd built a reputation on finding the truth had been blind to the biggest lie of his life. But that ended tonight. Tracy and Ryan had made a fatal mistake. They'd underestimated him. And Cole Mitchell never forgot a betrayal, and never forgave one. Chapter 2. The Hunter's Awakening. The police station buzzes with late-night activity, even at 9:30 p.m. Cole Mitchell walked through the familiar corridors with the confidence of someone who belonged, nodding to officers he'd worked with over the years. His private investigation firm had maintained strong relationships with local law enforcement, relationships he was about to leverage in ways that would blur every ethical line he'd ever drawn. Detective Frank Morrison looked up from his desk with surprise. Cole, what brings you here this late? And why do you look like someone pissed in your coffee? Frank had been Cole's partner for 8 years before Cole left the force to start his own business. They'd remained close friends, built on a foundation of shared danger and mutual respect. If anyone would understand what Cole was about to ask, it would be Frank. I need a favor, Frank. A big one. And I need you to not ask too many questions. Frank leaned back in his chair, studying Cole's face. That bad, huh? What's going on? Cole settled into the chair across from Frank's desk, the same chair where he'd sat countless times discussing cases. But this time, he was the client with a problem that needed solving. My wife is cheating on me. With Ryan Hoffman. Remember him from the Morrison case 3 years ago? Frank's expression darkened. The real estate developer who walked on those zoning violations? Yeah, I remember. Slippery bastard. He paused. Sorry about Tracy, man. That's rough. It gets worse. Cole leaned forward. I have reason to believe they're planning to kill me. The casual atmosphere in the room evaporated instantly. Frank sat forward, his cop instincts fully engaged. What kind of reason? Cole explained the encounter at the diner, watching Frank's expression grow grimmer with each detail. When he finished, Frank was quiet for a long moment. That's some serious shit, Cole. We need to set up surveillance, get you some protection. No. Cole's voice was flat, final. That's not why I'm here. Frank studied his friend's face, recognition slowly dawning. Cole, whatever you're thinking. 22 years ago, I was 8 years old when I watched my father get gunned down in our driveway by my mother's boyfriend. Cole's voice was steady, emotionless, but Frank could see the old pain flickering in his eyes. She'd been planning it for months. Insurance money, new life, all that cliched bullshit. You know what happened to them. Frank knew the story, but he let Cole tell it. The boyfriend got life without parole. My mother got 25 to life. I spent the next 10 years in foster care, bouncing between families who saw me as a paycheck. You know what I learned in those 10 years, Frank? What? That forgiveness is a luxury I can't afford. That people who betray trust don't deserve second chances. And that sometimes the system isn't enough. Frank shifted uncomfortably. Cole, I get it. I do. But you can't. I'm not asking you to break the law, Frank. I'm asking you to help me gather information. Legal information. Public records. background checks, surveillance footage from traffic cameras. Things any PI could access with the right connections. And then what? Cole smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. Then I'm going to destroy them. Completely. Legally. And permanently. Frank was quiet for several minutes, weighing his friendship against his badge. Finally, he sighed. What do you need? Over the next hour, Cole outlined his requirements. He needed Tracy and Ryan's financial records, bank statements, credit card purchases, phone records. He needed their schedules, their patterns, their weaknesses. Frank had access to databases and resources that would take Cole weeks to obtain through proper channels. Ryan Hoffman owns 3 properties in the county, Frank said, pulling up records on his computer. His primary residence in Maple Heights, a cabin up at Crystal Lake, and... He paused, frowning. This is interesting. He just purchased a warehouse property downtown under an LLC. Paid cash, closed last week. A warehouse. Cole leaned over to look at the screen. What would he need with industrial space? Nothing good, considering the context. Frank printed the documents. Cole, if they're planning something, we should let them. Cole folded the papers and tucked them inside his jacket. I want them to make the first move. I want them to commit to their plan, to cross that line they can't uncross. Because once they do, everything that happens after becomes justified. Frank looked uncomfortable. And what exactly is going to happen after? Cole stood up, his decision made. Ryan Hoffman destroyed my father's construction business with false zoning complaints before he had him killed. He spent his whole life using lawyers and money to escape consequences. Tracy promised to love and honor me for better or worse, then decided worse meant I should die. He moved toward the door, then paused. They want to play a game where the stakes are my life. Fine, but they're about to learn that I know games they've never even heard of. As Cole walked through the parking lot to his truck, his phone buzzed with a text from Tracy. Hope you're feeling better. Going to bed early. Love you. The irony wasn't lost on him. She was probably with Ryan right now, finalizing whatever plan they'd hatched. But they were operating under a fatal assumption, that Cole Mitchell was just another mark, another victim who wouldn't see them coming. They were wrong. Cole had spent 2 decades learning how to hunt people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. Corporate embezzlers, insurance fraudsters, cheating spouses. He'd tracked them all down and exposed their secrets. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't interested in exposure. He was interested in destruction. As he drove home through the darkened streets, Cole began formulating his strategy. Ryan and Tracy wanted him dead? He'd let them think they had the upper hand. He'd play the oblivious husband right up until the moment they made their move. And then he'd show them what happened when someone tried to hunt a hunter. The house was dark when Cole arrived home, Tracy's car already in the driveway. He found her in bed, apparently asleep, her breathing deep and regular. As he stood in the doorway watching her, Cole felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, no regret. Just cold, calculating determination. She'd made her choice. Now he'd make his. Chapter 3, The Web Begins. 3 weeks had passed since the diner incident, and Cole Mitchell had transformed himself into a different kind of predator. During the day, he maintained his normal routine, meeting clients, conducting background checks, following cheating spouses for bitter divorce proceedings. But his evenings had become something else entirely, a masterclass in psychological warfare. Tracy had no idea that her husband had become a ghost in his own life, documenting her every move, her every lie, every secret meeting with Ryan Hoffman. Cole's investigative skills, honed over 2 decades, had turned his wife into an open book written in a language she didn't even know he could read. The warehouse Frank had discovered became Cole's primary focus. Using his network of contacts, security guards, maintenance workers, city inspectors, he'd pieced together a disturbing picture. Ryan had been retrofitting the space with soundproofing, industrial-grade plastic sheeting, and chemical storage containers. The kind of setup someone might use if they needed to dispose of a body without leaving evidence. They're not amateurs, Cole told Frank during one of their weekly coffee meetings. Ryan's done this before. Frank nearly choked on his coffee. Before? What do you mean before? Cole slid a folder across the table. Remember Angela Summers? Ryan's ex-fiancée who supposedly moved to Florida 3 years ago. Yeah, what about her? She never made it to Florida. Her credit cards stopped being used the day after she broke up with Ryan. Her cell phone went dead that same night. No forwarding address, no contact with family, nothing. Cole's voice was matter-of-fact, professional. I think Ryan's been planning murders for a while now. Frank stared at the documents, his cop instincts warring with his friendship. Cole, if this is true, we need to let them make their move. Cole closed the folder. Because right now, all we have are suspicions and circumstantial evidence. But when they try to kill me, we'll have attempted murder. And that's when I destroy them both. What Frank didn't know was that Cole had no intention of letting the police handle Ryan and Tracy once they revealed their plan. He'd spent the past 3 weeks setting up his own trap, one that would ensure they paid a price the justice system could never extract. The first phase had been simple, making himself appear vulnerable. Cole had started complaining of chest pains, scheduling doctor's appointments, mentioning his family history of heart disease in casual conversations. He'd even gone so far as to research the symptoms of various heart conditions, dropping hints that he might be experiencing early warning signs. Maybe I should update our life insurance, he'd mentioned to Tracy over dinner the week before. With my family history and these chest pains, I want to make sure you're taken care of. Tracy's eyes had lit up with barely concealed excitement. That's very thoughtful, honey. How much were you thinking? The maximum they'll allow. Maybe $2 million. That night, Tracy had excused herself to take a long bath, but Cole knew she was really texting Ryan. He'd installed monitoring software on her phone weeks ago, giving him access to every message, every call, every photo she sent or received. The texts were damning. Tracy, he wants to increase the life insurance to $2 million. Ryan. Perfect timing. How are his symptoms? Tracy, getting worse. He made another doctor's appointment. Ryan. Good. Stick to the plan. Natural causes, remember? Tracy, what about the backup plan? Ryan, warehouse is ready if we need it. But let's hope we don't. Cole had screenshot every message, building a digital file that would destroy them both when the time came. But evidence wasn't enough. Not for what they'd put him through, not for what they were planning to do. The second phase involved giving them opportunities. Cole had started working late, taking solo fishing trips, creating windows where an accident could believably occur. He'd even suggested a romantic weekend getaway to Tracy, knowing she'd coordinate with Ryan to make it the perfect time for their plan. How about that cabin resort up at Mirror Lake? Cole had suggested, watching Tracy's face carefully. Just the two of us, no phones, no distractions. That sounds wonderful, Tracy had said, but Cole caught the quick calculation in her eyes. Mirror Lake was isolated, surrounded by cliffs and deep water. The perfect place for a grieving widow to report her husband's tragic accident. But Cole had no intention of being a victim. Instead, he'd spent the past week preparing Mirror Lake for a very different kind of accident. The cabin resort was owned by an old client, Martha Hendricks, whose cheating husband Cole had exposed 2 years earlier. She owed him a favor, and when Cole explained what he needed, access to the property, security camera footage, and most importantly, her silence, Martha had agreed without hesitation. That bastard Ryan Hoffman tried to buy my place last year, Martha had said, her voice filled with disgust. Offered half what it was worth, then tried to get the county to condemn it when I refused. You do whatever you need to do, Cole. Now, as Cole sat in his truck outside Ryan's downtown office building, watching the man himself emerge and climb into his black BMW, he felt the familiar calm that came before decisive action. Ryan was heading to meet Tracy at their usual spot, a coffee shop on the other side of town where they thought they were safe from observation. Cole didn't follow. He didn't need to. He knew what they were discussing, the final details of his murder, scheduled for tomorrow night at Mirror Lake. Instead, he drove to the warehouse district, parking in the shadows across from Ryan's newly purchased building. Using lockpicks that were definitely not legal for a private investigator to carry, Cole gained entry to the warehouse. What he found inside confirmed his worst suspicions. The space had been divided into sections, a soundproof room with plastic-covered walls, industrial-grade drains in the concrete floor, and tanks filled with chemicals that could dissolve organic matter. Ryan hadn't just planned to kill Cole. He'd planned to erase him completely, leaving Tracy free to collect the insurance money and live happily ever after. But Cole had a different ending in mind. Working quickly, he planted his own modifications throughout the warehouse. Micro cameras, hidden in places Ryan would never think to look. Motion sensors connected to his phone. And in the chemical storage area, A few carefully placed devices that would ensure anyone who tried to use the facility for its intended purpose would find themselves dealing with a very different kind of chemistry. As he prepared to leave, Cole's phone buzzed with a text from Tracy. "Looking forward to our romantic getaway tomorrow, honey. It'll be a trip we'll never forget." She was right about that, Cole thought as he locked the warehouse behind him. It would indeed be a trip none of them would ever forget. Tomorrow night, Tracy and Ryan would learn that the man they'd been planning to murder was not the helpless victim they imagined. They'd discover that some prey was actually predator, and that the trap they'd so carefully set had become their own cage. Cole Mitchell had spent 3 weeks playing the part of the oblivious husband. Now it was time to reveal who he really was. Chapter 4, Mirror Lake. The drive to Mirror Lake should have been romantic. Tracy chatted excitedly about their weekend getaway, pointing out landmarks and reminiscing about happier times in their marriage. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple rekindling their relationship, eager for some time alone together. Cole played his part perfectly, smiling at her stories, reaching over to squeeze her hand, even stopping to buy her favorite flowers at a roadside stand. But beneath the facade, he was cataloging every detail of the route, every possible escape path, every tactical advantage the terrain might offer. "You seem more relaxed already," Tracy said as they wound through the mountain roads. "I think this is exactly what we needed." "I think you're right," Cole agreed, meaning something entirely different than she imagined. Mirror Lake Resort sat nestled in a valley surrounded by steep cliffs and dense forest. The main lodge was a rustic building of logs and stone, while individual cabins dotted the shoreline like scattered coins. Martha Hendricks greeted them at the front desk with the kind of warm smile that came from years of practice. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, so wonderful to see you again," Martha said, though Cole was certain they'd never been there before. She was playing her role perfectly. "Your cabin is ready, and I've stocked the kitchen with everything you requested." Tracy looked confused for a moment. They hadn't requested anything, but Cole smoothly interjected. "You're too kind, Martha. The flowers are a nice touch." In their cabin, a spacious structure right on the water's edge, Tracy seemed nervous for the first time since they'd arrived. She kept checking her phone, presumably for messages from Ryan, and jumped at every small sound from outside. "Something wrong?" Cole asked, unpacking their bags. "No, of course not. Just, it's so quiet here. Different from the city." Cole nodded understandingly, though he knew the real reason for her anxiety. According to the text messages he'd been monitoring, Ryan was supposed to be in position by sunset, ready to execute their plan. But Cole's modifications to their scheme had already begun. Earlier that morning, using his contacts at the phone company, Cole had arranged for a cell tower maintenance issue that would knock out service in the Mirror Lake area starting at 6 p.m. Tracy and Ryan would lose communication at the exact moment they needed it most. "Why don't we take a walk before dinner?" Cole suggested. "The sunset should be beautiful from the overlook." Tracy's face went pale. "Actually, I'm feeling a bit tired from the drive. Maybe we could just stay in tonight." "Come on," Cole insisted, taking her hand. "We came here to reconnect, remember? A romantic walk by the lake, just like in the movies." With no plausible excuse to refuse, Tracy allowed herself to be led outside. As they walked along the shoreline trail, Cole pointed out wildlife and scenery, maintaining the illusion of a husband trying to salvage his marriage. But his eyes were constantly scanning the treeline, looking for signs of Ryan's presence. He found them at the overlook, subtle disturbances in the undergrowth, cigarette butts that hadn't been there that morning, and most tellingly, fresh tire tracks at a service road that led to the cliffs above. Ryan was in position, waiting for the perfect moment to stage Cole's tragic accident. "It's beautiful up here," Tracy said, but her voice was strained. She kept glancing toward the woods, obviously looking for some sign from her lover. "Yes," Cole agreed. "Very isolated. The kind of place where accidents can happen so easily." Tracy's head snapped toward him, searching his face for hidden meaning. But Cole's expression remained serene, that of a man simply appreciating nature with his wife. As the sun began to set, painting the lake in shades of gold and crimson, Cole made his move. "I brought something for you," he said, pulling a small wrapped box from his pocket. Tracy's hands shook as she accepted it. "Cole, you didn't need to. Open it." Inside the box was a necklace, but not just any necklace. It was the same one Ryan had given Tracy for their anniversary, The one Cole had seen her wearing in dozens of surveillance photos. The one she'd hidden in her jewelry box, thinking her husband would never notice. Tracy's face went white as she stared at the familiar piece. "How did you?" "You left it in Ryan's car last Tuesday," Cole said conversationally. "He dropped it off at the house while you were at work. Said you'd forgotten it after your lunch meeting." The lie was perfectly constructed, designed to shatter Tracy's sense of security while making her wonder what else Cole knew. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it, realizing that any explanation would only dig her deeper. "Cole, I can explain." "No need," Cole said, his voice still calm. "I understand completely." That's when Ryan Hoffman stepped out of the woods, exactly as Cole had known he would. But instead of finding a vulnerable target, Ryan found himself facing a man who'd been expecting him all along. "Evening, Ryan," Cole said pleasantly. "Beautiful night for a murder, isn't it?" Ryan's hand moved toward the pistol Cole was certain he carried, but stopped when Cole held up his own weapon, a .45 caliber Glock that had appeared in his hand as if by magic. "I wouldn't," Cole advised. "I've been practicing." Tracy looked between the two men in confusion and growing terror. "What's happening? Why does everyone have guns?" "Because your boyfriend here was planning to shoot me and make it look like a hiking accident," Cole explained patiently. "Push my body off the cliff, let the authorities assume I slipped and fell. Very clean, very believable. The grieving widow collects the insurance money, and you two live happily ever after." Ryan's face had gone through several color changes, finally settling on a sickly gray. "You're crazy, Mitchell. We're just here to kill me," Cole finished. "Yes, I know. I've known for weeks. Every text message, every phone call, every secret meeting at Rosie's Diner. I know about the warehouse downtown, the chemicals, the backup plan in case the accident scenario didn't work out." Tracy slumped against a nearby tree, the weight of discovery crushing her carefully constructed world. "How long have you known?" "Since the night Tony Rodriguez saved my life by spilling water on me." Cole's voice grew colder. "The question is, how long have you two been planning to murder me?" Ryan, apparently deciding that honesty was his only remaining option, straightened his shoulders. "Since you refused to sell the house to my development company. That property is worth $10 million in the right hands." "And my wife? What's her excuse?" Tracy's tears had dried, replaced by something harder, more honest. "I fell out of love with you years ago, Cole. But divorce would have meant splitting assets, fighting over everything we built together. This way was cleaner." Cole nodded as if she'd just explained her preference for coffee over tea. "I see. So you decided murder was more convenient than divorce." "We didn't want to hurt you," Tracy said, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. Cole laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "You were planning to dissolve my body in industrial acid, Tracy. In what universe is that not wanting to hurt me?" The conversation was interrupted by the sound of vehicles approaching on the service road. Ryan's eyes darted toward the noise, hope flickering in his expression. "That would be the cavalry," Cole said. "But not the kind you're hoping for." Detective Frank Morrison emerged from the woods, flanked by two uniformed officers. Behind them came Martha Hendricks, carrying a video camera that had been recording the entire conversation. "Ryan Hoffman, Tracy Mitchell," Frank said formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Ryan finally found his voice. "You can't do this. You have no proof." Cole smiled, pulling out his phone. With a few swipes, he brought up the surveillance footage from the warehouse, the intercepted text messages, the financial records showing their joint planning sessions. "I've been building a case against you for 3 weeks," he said. "Every conversation, every meeting, every step of your plan has been documented. But more importantly," he gestured toward the woods, where additional figures were emerging. Members of Ryan's construction crew, some of Cole's investigative contacts, and several other people Ryan would have recognized if he hadn't been so focused on his own schemes. "While you were planning my murder, I was planning something else entirely. See, I've discovered some very interesting things about your business practices, Ryan. Things that a lot of people would be very interested to hear about." As Ryan and Tracy were led away, Tracy turned back one last time. "I loved you once, Cole. That was real." Cole's expression didn't change. Once wasn't enough. Chapter 5. The Unraveling. The Riverside County Jail's visitor room smelled of disinfectant and desperation. Cole Mitchell sat across from his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, watching as the reality of her situation slowly sank in. Tracy looked smaller somehow, diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the weight of her choices. "The lawyer says I could get life without parole," Tracy said quietly. "Conspiracy to commit murder carries the same sentence as actually doing it." "I know," Cole replied, his voice neutral. "I helped write some of the legislation." Tracy's eyes widened. "You what?" 7 years ago, I lobbied for tougher sentences for murder-for-hire schemes. Worked with state representatives to close loopholes that let people walk away with minimal sentences." Cole leaned back in his chair. Ironic, isn't it? The silence stretched between them, filled with all the things they couldn't unsay, all the choices that couldn't be undone. Finally, Tracy spoke again. "What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your decisions." Cole's tone was matter-of-fact, clinical. "Ryan's already trying to cut a deal, by the way, blaming everything on you, claiming you manipulated him into the whole scheme." Tracy's face crumpled. "But that's not. He was the one who. Doesn't matter. He's got better lawyers, more money, and a cleaner public image. Guess which story the prosecutor's going to find more believable?" The revelation hit Tracy like a physical blow. The man she'd betrayed her marriage for was now betraying her to save himself. Cole watched her process this with the same detachment he'd once applied to surveillance subjects. "You could help me," Tracy said suddenly, desperation creeping into her voice. "Tell them the truth about Ryan, about how he manipulated both of us." Cole's laugh was soft but cutting. "Help you? Tracy, you were planning to dissolve my body in acid. Why would I help you?" "Because I'm still your wife. Because we had 12 years together, and some of that had to mean something." "It did mean something," Cole said quietly. "It meant I trusted you completely. It meant I believed your promises, your vows, your lies. It meant I was willing to die for you." His voice hardened. "And you were willing to let me." Before Tracy could respond, Cole stood up. "There's something else you should know. About your boyfriend's past activities." "What do you mean?" "Remember Angela Summers? Ryan's ex-fiancée who supposedly moved to Florida?" Tracy nodded hesitantly. "She never made it to Florida. Her body was found yesterday in a construction site Ryan developed 3 years ago. Concrete foundation, very deep." Cole's expression remained impassive as Tracy's face went white. "DNA confirmed it this morning. Ryan's been a murderer for a while now. You were just his latest accomplice." The words hit Tracy like successive hammer blows. Not only had she destroyed her marriage and her life, but she'd done it for a man who'd already killed at least one other woman. "I didn't know," Tracy whispered. "Doesn't matter," Cole replied. "You're an accessory after the fact now. The prosecutor's going to argue that you helped plan my murder knowing Ryan had killed before." As Cole prepared to leave, Tracy grabbed his arm through the barrier. "Please, Cole. I know I don't deserve it, but please, help me. I'm scared." Cole looked down at her hand, then back at her face. For just a moment, Tracy saw a flicker of the man she'd married, the one who'd once promised to protect her from everything. Then it was gone. "You should be scared," Cole said, gently removing her hand from his arm. "But that's not my problem anymore." Outside the jail, Detective Frank Morrison was waiting by Cole's truck. His expression was troubled, the look of a man wrestling with uncomfortable truths. "Heard you visited the wife," Frank said. "How's she holding up?" "About as well as you'd expect." Cole climbed into his truck, rolling down the window. "Any word on Ryan's other activities?" Frank nodded grimly. "The Angela Summers murder opens up everything. We're getting search warrants for all his properties, and the DA's looking into several other missing persons cases. This could be bigger than we thought." "Good. What about the warehouse?" "Crime scene techs are still processing it, but preliminary results confirm your suspicions. That place was set up for body disposal, no question. Your modifications probably saved your life. When they tested the chemical mixture Ryan had prepared, it would have dissolved organic matter in under 6 hours." Cole felt a cold satisfaction at the confirmation. His instincts had been right. Tracy and Ryan hadn't just been planning a simple murder. They'd been preparing to erase him completely. "There's something else," Frank continued. "Ryan's lawyer is claiming his client was mentally unstable, not responsible for his actions. They're going for an insanity plea." "Let them try," Cole said. "I've got hours of surveillance footage showing careful, methodical planning. Nothing insane about it, just evil." As Cole drove away from the jail, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but when he answered, The voice was familiar. Mr. Mitchell? This is Tony Rodriguez from Rosie's Diner. Tony, what can I do for you? I heard about what happened at the lake. About your wife and that man. I just wanted to say, I'm glad you're okay. And I'm sorry it had to end that way. Cole pulled over to the side of the road. You saved my life, Tony. You have nothing to apologize for. Still, it must be hard. Finding out someone you loved wanted you dead. Cole was quiet for a moment, considering the weight of those words. The hardest part isn't that she wanted me dead, Tony. The hardest part is that I'm not surprised. That night, alone in his house for the first time in weeks, Cole sat in his study surrounded by case files and evidence boxes. Everything he'd built against Tracy and Ryan was documented, cataloged, and ready for trial. The legal system would handle them now, process them through courts and prisons, extract whatever justice it could. But as Cole looked around the home he'd shared with Tracy, the photos they'd taken together, the furniture they'd chosen, the life they'd built on a foundation of lies, he felt something beyond satisfaction or relief. He felt empty. The hunt was over. The predators were caught. Justice would be served. So why did victory feel so much like defeat? Chapter 6. The Price of Truth. 3 months after the arrests, Cole Mitchell's life had settled into a new routine. The media attention had died down, the legal proceedings were moving through their predictable channels, and the investigative community had added another chapter to the legend of the PI who'd outsmarted his own would-be murderers. But success had come with unexpected costs. Cole sat in his office, reviewing the preliminary hearing transcripts, when his secretary knocked on the door. Linda had worked for him for 8 years, and her usually cheerful demeanor had been strained ever since the story broke. There's someone here to see you, she said hesitantly. Says she's Ryan Hoffman's daughter. Cole looked up from his papers. Send her in. The young woman who entered was maybe 25, with Ryan's blonde hair but softer features. She moved with the careful control of someone trying very hard not to fall apart. Mr. Mitchell? I'm Jessica Hoffman. I wanted to thank you. Cole gestured for her to sit. Thank me for what? For stopping my father before he killed again. Jessica's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she spoke. I've spent 3 years wondering what happened to Angela Summers. She was my friend. We worked together at the marketing firm before she started dating my dad. The revelation hit Cole unexpectedly. He'd been so focused on the threat to his own life that he'd never considered the collateral damage of Ryan's previous crimes. I reported her missing when she disappeared, Jessica continued. But the police said she'd probably just left town, started over somewhere new. My father supported that theory, said Angela had always been unstable, unpredictable. She wiped her eyes. I knew he was lying, but I couldn't prove it. What made you suspect him? Little things at first. He had her keys, said she'd given them to him before she left. But I knew Angela. She would never have given up her car, her apartment, without telling someone where she was going. Jessica's composure finally cracked. And then there were the phone calls. What phone calls? Angela called me the night she disappeared. She was scared, said my father had become possessive, controlling. She was planning to break up with him the next day, and she was worried about how he'd react. Jessica looked directly at Cole. That was the last time anyone heard from her. Cole felt a familiar anger building in his chest. Not the cold calculation that had driven his revenge against Tracy and Ryan, but something more immediate, more human. Jessica had lost a friend and spent 3 years not knowing what happened to her. I should have pushed harder, Jessica said. Should have made the police listen. If I had, maybe Angela would still be alive. Maybe your wife wouldn't have gotten involved with him. This isn't your fault, Cole said firmly. Your father is a psychopath who's very good at manipulating people. The blame belongs with him, not with you. They talked for another hour, Jessica sharing memories of Angela while Cole provided details about the investigation he was comfortable revealing. When she finally left, Cole felt something he hadn't experienced in months, doubt about his own actions. He'd been so focused on revenge, on making Tracy and Ryan pay for their betrayal, that he'd never considered the broader implications. How many other people had Ryan hurt? How many families were still wondering what happened to their loved ones? That evening, Cole drove to Rosie's Diner. Tony Rodriguez was working his usual shift, and his face lit up when he saw Cole enter. Mr. Mitchell, good to see you. The usual booth? Cole nodded, settling into the same seat where his world had changed 3 months earlier. Tony brought coffee without being asked, then lingered nervously. Something on your mind, Tony? I've been thinking about that night, about the note I gave you. Part of me wonders if I should have minded my own business, you know? Let things play out naturally. Cole studied the younger man's face. You regret warning me? No, of course not. You didn't deserve what they were planning. It's just. Tony struggled for words. My cousin works construction, and he says Ryan Hoffman's companies employed a lot of immigrant workers. Paid cash, no questions asked, you know? Now that his business is falling apart, those guys are out of work, struggling to feed their families. The weight of unintended consequences pressed down on Cole's shoulders. He destroyed Ryan's empire so completely that the ripple effects were reaching people who'd never even heard his name. I'm not saying you were wrong, Tony continued. But sometimes when you tear down something evil, good people get hurt too. Cole left the diner with more questions than answers. At home, he found a stack of mail that Linda had forwarded from the office. Mixed in with the usual bills and junk were dozens of letters from people who'd read about the case. Some were supportive, congratulating him on his investigative skills and survival instincts. Others were from crime victims, asking for help with their own cases. But one letter, handwritten on expensive stationery, stood out from the rest. Mr. Mitchell, my name is Robert Chun, and I am the father of Michelle Chun, who disappeared 4 years ago after dating Ryan Hoffman. The police never took her disappearance seriously because she was an adult and had left no signs of struggle. I have followed your case closely, and I believe my daughter may have suffered the same fate as Angela Summers. I have documentation of her relationship with Mr. Hoffman, including threatening text messages he sent when she tried to end things. I am willing to pay any fee you require if you would consider investigating my daughter's case. I need to know what happened to her. Respectfully, Robert Chun. Cole set the letter down, his hands shaking slightly. How many were there? How many women had Ryan killed before he'd started planning Cole's murder? The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Frank Morrison's voice was grim. Cole, we've got a problem. Ryan's lawyer is filing motions to suppress most of our evidence. Claims illegal surveillance, entrapment, violation of due process. What's the likelihood they'll succeed? Higher than I'd like. Some of the methods you use to gather information, let's just say they're ethically gray. A good defense attorney could argue that you were acting as an agent of the police without proper warrants. Cole felt his carefully constructed case beginning to crumble. All the evidence he'd gathered, all the proof of Ryan and Tracy's guilt, might be thrown out on technicalities. There's something else, Frank continued. Tracy's lawyer is pushing for a plea deal. Manslaughter instead of first-degree murder, with the possibility of parole in 15 years. No. Cole's voice was flat, final. She planned to murder me for insurance money. That's first-degree murder, premeditated and cold-blooded. Cole, if we lose the evidence, we might not be able to prove premeditation. A plea deal might be our only chance to put her away. After hanging up, Cole sat in his darkened living room, surrounded by the ghosts of his former life. Photos of him and Tracy smiled down from the walls, frozen moments of happiness that now felt like lies. He'd thought revenge would bring closure, that justice would heal the wounds of betrayal. Instead, he found himself questioning everything, his methods, his motives, even his right to destroy the lives of people who'd never directly threatened him. Jessica Hoffman had thanked him for stopping her father, but she'd also lost the only family she had left. Tony Rodriguez's cousin was unemployed because Cole had systematically destroyed Ryan's business empire. And now Robert Chun was begging him to investigate another daughter's disappearance, adding to the weight of responsibility Cole carried. The man who'd once believed that truth was absolute, that justice was simple, now found himself drowning in shades of gray. He'd set out to punish his wife and her lover for their betrayal, but the consequences of his actions rippled outward like stones thrown into still water, touching lives he'd never intended to affect. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows, and Cole Mitchell, the hunter who'd become the hunted who'd become the hunter again, wondered if the price of truth was worth what it had cost him to learn it. Chapter 7. No Mercy. 6 months after the arrests, Cole Mitchell stood in the courthouse lobby watching his former life officially end. Tracy's plea hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m., and despite Frank Morrison's warnings about the strength of their evidence, Cole remained adamantly opposed to any deal that didn't involve life in prison. She planned to murder me. Cole had told the prosecutor that morning. Not in a moment of passion, not in self-defense, not by accident. She sat down with her lover and methodically planned my death for money. There's no lesser charge that fits that crime. District Attorney Patricia Williams had listened with the patience of someone who'd heard similar arguments from victims' families countless times before. Mr. Mitchell, I understand your feelings, but we have to be realistic about what we can prove in court. The defense has succeeded in suppressing key pieces of evidence. Then use what you have left. What we have left might not be enough for a murder conviction. If the jury acquits, she walks away completely free. A manslaughter plea means she serves real time. Cole's jaw tightened. How much time? 8 to 12 years, with possibility of parole in 6. No. The conversation had ended there, but Cole knew the legal system would move forward with or without his approval. Victims' families could voice their opinions, but they couldn't dictate prosecutorial strategy. Now, as he waited for the hearing to begin, Cole watched the various players in his personal drama gather in the courthouse. Tracy's parents had driven in from Ohio, their faces showing the strain of watching their daughter's life implode. Ryan's daughter Jessica sat alone on the opposite side of the lobby, avoiding eye contact with everyone. At precisely 2 p.m., Cole took his seat in the gallery as Tracy was led into the courtroom. She'd lost weight during her time in custody, and the orange jumpsuit made her look younger, more vulnerable. For just a moment, Cole felt an echo of the protective instinct that had once driven him to work extra hours to provide for her, to shield her from life's hardships. Then he remembered the text messages, the warehouse, the planned acid bath, and the feeling disappeared. Judge Rebecca Foster called the court to order and addressed Tracy directly. Ms. Mitchell, you are here today to enter a plea to the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree. Before we proceed, I want to ensure you understand the gravity of this charge and the consequences of your plea. Tracy's lawyer, an expensive suited man named David Kellerman, stood up. Your Honor, my client wishes to enter a plea of guilty to the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter, as outlined in the plea agreement. There is no plea agreement, interrupted Ada Williams, rising from her table. The victim has refused to accept any deal that doesn't reflect the premeditated nature of this crime. Judge Foster looked surprised. Mr. Kellerman, I was under the impression this matter had been resolved. Kellerman's composure slipped slightly. Your Honor, we've been negotiating in good faith with the prosecutor's office. My client is prepared to accept responsibility for her actions, but the state's insistence on a murder charge is unreasonable given the circumstances. What circumstances? Cole stood up from the gallery, his voice cutting through the formal atmosphere of the courtroom. What circumstances make planning my murder for 6 months anything less than first-degree murder? Judge Foster gavelled for order. Mr. Mitchell, please be seated. You'll have an opportunity to speak during victim impact statements if this proceeds to sentencing. But Cole remained standing. Your Honor, I've listened to lawyers talk about circumstances and deals for months now. My wife and her lover spent half a year planning to kill me, dissolve my body in acid, and collect $2 million in insurance money. They purchased chemicals, rented a warehouse, and would have succeeded if not for a random act of kindness from a diner waiter. Please explain to me what circumstance makes that anything less than premeditated murder. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Foster studied Cole's face for a long moment before speaking. Mr. Mitchell, while I understand your position, the determination of appropriate charges rests with the prosecutor's office, not with victims' families. Then the prosecutor's office has failed, Cole said flatly. And if the legal system won't hold my wife accountable for her crimes, I'll find other ways to ensure justice is served. The threat was unmistakable, and it sent a ripple of tension through the courtroom. Ada Williams shot to her feet. Your Honor, I move that Mr. Mitchell be removed from the courtroom. That won't be necessary, Judge Foster said firmly. Mr. Mitchell, please take your seat and allow these proceedings to continue. Any further outbursts will result in your removal and possible contempt charges. Cole sat down, but his message had been delivered. He would not accept a plea deal, and if the legal system failed him, he would handle the matter himself. The hearing continued for another hour, with lawyers arguing over evidence and procedure while Tracy sat silently at the defense table. Finally, Judge Foster announced that she would take the matter under advisement and schedule another hearing for the following week. As the courtroom emptied, Cole found himself face to face with Tracy's parents in the hallway. Margaret and Donald Carson had always been polite to him during family gatherings, but their faces now showed a mixture of grief and accusation. "This vendetta of yours needs to stop," Margaret said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Tracy made a terrible mistake, but she's still our daughter. She doesn't deserve to spend the rest of her life in prison." Cole's expression remained impassive. "She planned to murder me for money, Mrs. Carson. What do you think would be an appropriate consequence for that?" "She was manipulated," Donald Carson interjected. "That Ryan character filled her head with lies, made her think things that weren't true. She's not a killer, Cole. You know that." "Actually, I don't know that anymore," Cole replied. "I thought I knew a lot of things about your daughter that turn out to be false. Her capacity for murder is just one more item on that list." Margaret Carson began to cry. "Please, Cole. She loved you once. That has to count for something." Cole looked at the woman who'd raised Tracy, who'd welcomed him into their family, who'd probably spent sleepless nights wondering where she'd gone wrong. For a moment, he felt a flicker of sympathy. Then he remembered waking up in his truck outside the police station 6 months ago, remembering the waiter's warning, and realizing how close he'd come to being dissolved in a vat of industrial acid. "Love isn't enough," Cole said quietly. "It never was." As the Carsons walked away, their shoulders bowed with defeat, Cole felt someone approaching from behind. He turned to find Jessica Hoffman, Ryan's daughter, her face pale but determined. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, "I heard what you said in there about finding other ways to ensure justice. I want to help." Cole studied her face, seeing something familiar in her expression. It was the same cold determination he'd felt when he'd first read the waiter's warning, the same absolute certainty that some crimes couldn't be forgiven. "What did you have in mind?" "My father destroyed a lot of lives, and most of his victims will never see justice. The legal system is going to fail them just like it's failing you." Jessica's voice was steady, controlled. "But there are other kinds of justice. Other ways to make sure bad people pay for what they've done." Cole felt a chill of recognition. Jessica Hoffman wasn't just offering to help. She was offering to become the same kind of predator he'd become. The cycle of revenge was beginning again, spreading outward like a virus. But as he looked into her eyes, Cole realized he didn't care about breaking cycles or preventing future violence. He cared about making sure Tracy and Ryan paid the full price for their crimes, whatever that price might be. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked. Jessica smiled, and in that expression, Cole saw the birth of something dark and inevitable. "I'm proposing we give them the same mercy they showed their victims," she said. "None at all." Chapter 8. The Final Hunt. The warehouse district looked different at night. Empty streets reflected streetlight pools that created islands of visibility in an ocean of shadows. Cole Mitchell and Jessica Hoffman moved through this landscape like ghosts, their dark clothing helping them blend with the industrial decay around them. "You sure about the guard schedule?" Cole whispered as they approached the building where Ryan Hoffman had planned Cole's murder. "I've been watching for 2 weeks," Jessica replied. "Security company does a drive-by every 4 hours. Last one was at 10 p.m. Next won't be until 2 a.m. They'd spent a month planning this night, ever since their conversation outside the courthouse. The legal system had ultimately failed them both. Tracy had accepted a plea deal for voluntary manslaughter with a sentence of 8 to 15 years, while Ryan's expensive lawyers had managed to reduce his charges to conspiracy and accessory after the fact. Both would be eligible for parole within a decade. That wasn't justice. That was bureaucratic convenience. The warehouse stood silent and empty, officially sealed as evidence in an ongoing investigation, but practically forgotten by everyone except the 2 people now picking the lock on its rear entrance. Cole's hands were steady as he worked. 20 years of investigation had required him to develop certain skills that existed in legal gray areas. Inside, their flashlights revealed the space much as Cole had last seen it 6 months earlier. The plastic sheeting, the chemical tanks, the soundproof room, all of it preserved as a monument to Ryan's interrupted plans. But Cole and Jessica weren't here for nostalgia. "The transport arrives at midnight," Jessica said, checking her watch. "That gives us 30 minutes to set up." The transport was a private prisoner transfer van, the kind used to move inmates between facilities. Jessica had used her connections. Her father's construction company had employed several ex-convicts over the years to arrange for a very specific type of mechanical failure, during Ryan and Tracy's transfer to their respective prison facilities. Cole moved through the warehouse with professional efficiency, placing cameras in concealed locations and testing the modified chemical mixture he'd prepared. This batch wouldn't dissolve organic matter. It would do something much worse. "You know there's no coming back from this," Cole said as they worked. "Once we cross this line, we're no different than they are." Jessica paused in her preparations. "My father killed at least 3 women that we know about. Your wife was going to watch you die for insurance money. We crossed that line the moment we decided their lives were worth less than their victim's peace of mind." At 11:45 p.m., headlights appeared in the distance. The van approached slowly, its driver navigating the dark streets with the caution of someone who knew he was breaking several laws. It pulled up to the warehouse's loading dock, and 3 figures emerged. The driver was Miguel Santos, one of Jessica's contacts. The 2 passengers, handcuffed and shackled, were Ryan Hoffman and Tracy Mitchell. Transport broke down, Miguel announced unnecessarily. "Going to take a while to fix. Maybe an hour or 2. Cole felt a moment of savage satisfaction as he watched Tracy and Ryan realize where they were. Their eyes widened as they recognized the warehouse, understanding flooding their faces as they comprehended what was about to happen. "Cole, please," Tracy said, her voice breaking. "Please don't do this." "Do what?" Cole asked conversationally. "I'm not doing anything illegal. You 2 are here because of a mechanical failure during transport. Whatever happens next is just an unfortunate accident." Ryan was less diplomatic. "You sick fuck. You can't just kill you," Cole interrupted. "Dissolve your bodies in acid? Make you disappear forever while I collect insurance money and live happily ever after?" He smiled without warmth. Interesting theory. Jessica had been silent during this exchange, but now she spoke. "Angela Summers was 26 when you murdered her dad. She wanted to be a teacher. Michelle Chin was planning to open her own restaurant. Sarah Martinez was 3 months pregnant." Ryan's face went white. "How do you know about?" "I know about all of them," Jessica said coldly. "Every woman you killed, every life you destroyed. I've spent 2 years tracking down their families, their friends, their stories. Did you think they wouldn't be missed?" Cole began connecting cables to the chemical tanks while Miguel secured the warehouse doors. The space suddenly felt smaller, more enclosed, as if the walls were closing in. "This isn't justice," Tracy said desperately. "This is murder." "No," Cole corrected. "This is consequences. Justice would have been you spending life in prison. Justice would have been your boyfriend facing the electric chair for serial murder. Justice failed. So now you get consequences instead." The chemical mixture Cole had prepared wasn't designed to kill quickly. It was designed to cause the same terror, the same hopeless knowledge of impending death that Tracy and Ryan had planned to inflict on him. The difference was that their victims would experience it slowly, over the course of several hours, with plenty of time to contemplate their choices. "Please," Ryan begged, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "I have money, connections. I can make this worth your while." Jessica laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "You're going to bribe us? With what?" "The money you made from development deals built on murdered women's graves." As Cole made the final connections, he felt something unexpected, doubt. Not about Ryan and Tracy's guilt, not about the justice system's failure, but about what he was becoming. The man who'd started this journey had been a victim seeking answers. The man preparing to commit torture and murder was something else entirely. But then he remembered the waiter's note, the months of planning his death, the casual way Tracy had discussed dissolving his body. The doubt faded, replaced by cold determination. "Any last words?" Cole asked, his hand hovering over the activation switch. Tracy looked directly at him, tears streaming down her face. "I loved you. Whatever else happened, whatever I did, I loved you once. That was real." Cole stared at her for a long moment, remembering their wedding day, their first apartment, the dreams they'd shared about children and growing old together. For just an instant, he saw not the woman who'd planned his murder, but the girl he'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. Then he flipped the switch. The chemical mixture began to flow through the tubes Jessica had connected to their restraints. It wasn't acid. It was something Cole had developed specifically for this moment, a compound that would cause excruciating pain without immediate death. They would have hours to experience what they'd planned to inflict on him. As their screams began to echo through the soundproof space, Cole felt nothing. No satisfaction, No remorse, no sense of justice served. Just emptiness where his capacity for forgiveness had once lived. Miguel was already gone, having completed his part of the transaction. Jessica stood watching her father's suffering with the same clinical detachment Cole had once applied to surveillance work. "How long?" she asked. "4 to 6 hours, Cole replied, depending on their body weight and general health. They left the warehouse at 2:30 a.m., just before the scheduled security patrol. By morning, Ryan Hoffman and Tracy Mitchell would be dead, their bodies dissolved in chemicals that would leave no forensic evidence. The official investigation would conclude that they'd somehow escaped during transport and disappeared, probably fleeing to a country without extradition treaties. Their families would never know what really happened. Their victims' families would never have closure. And Cole Mitchell would spend the rest of his life knowing he'd become the very thing he'd once dedicated his career to stopping. But as he drove through the empty streets toward his house, Cole realized he didn't care about any of that. Tracy and Ryan had made their choice when they decided his life was worth less than their greed. Now they'd paid the price for that choice. The hunter had become the predator, and the predator felt no remorse. Chapter 9. The Empty Victory. 3 years later, Cole Mitchell sat in his study, staring at a newspaper article about the mysterious disappearance of Ryan Hoffman and Tracy Mitchell. The investigation had been officially closed 6 months ago, with authorities concluding that the pair had likely fled the country together after escaping during prisoner transport. No one suspected the truth. Miguel Santos had died in a car accident 8 months after the warehouse incident. A genuine accident, though Cole sometimes wondered if Jessica had arranged it to eliminate the last witness. Jessica herself had moved to Seattle, changed her name, and started a new life. They'd never spoken again after that night. The house felt different now. Cole had removed all traces of Tracy's presence. Photos, furniture, clothing, anything that reminded him of their 12 years together. What remained was sterile, functional, the home of a man who'd forgotten how to live rather than merely survive. His business thrived. Word had spread in certain circles that Cole Mitchell was the PI you called when the police couldn't help, when the legal system failed, when justice required methods that existed outside normal boundaries. He commanded premium fees and had a waiting list of clients who needed problems to disappear permanently. But success felt hollow when achieved through methods that would have horrified the man he'd once been. The doorbell rang, interrupting his brooding. Cole answered to find a young woman in her early 20s, her face showing the desperate determination he'd learned to recognize in potential clients. "Mr. Mitchell? My name is Amanda Foster. I need your help." Cole invited her in, noting the way she moved, careful, alert, like someone who'd been running for a long time. In his study, she declined his offer of coffee and got straight to business. "6 months ago, my sister disappeared. The police say she probably left voluntarily, but I know better. She was involved with a man who hurt her, controlled her. I think he killed her." Cole nodded, the familiar ritual beginning. "Tell me about this man." "His name is Derek Walsh. He's a lawyer, very connected, very powerful. When I tried to file a missing person report, I was told that my sister had called the police herself to say she was fine, that she didn't want to be contacted by family." "But you don't believe that?" Amanda's hands clenched into fists. "My sister would never abandon her daughter. She's got a 3-year-old, and she's devoted to that little girl. There's no way she'd disappear without taking Katie, or at least arranging for her care." Cole felt the familiar stirring of interest. A powerful man, a missing woman, official indifference. It was the kind of case that had once driven him to seek justice through legal means. Now it represented something else entirely. "What makes you think he killed her?" "I have evidence. Photos of bruises, medical records, text messages where she talks about being afraid of him. But none of it matters because he's got connections, money, influence." Amanda's voice broke slightly. "The system failed her just like it failed your wife's victims." Cole went very still. "What do you know about my wife?" "I know she disappeared along with her boyfriend 3 years ago. I know they were never found despite a massive manhunt. And I know that other people who've crossed you have had a tendency to vanish without a trace." The accusation hung in the air between them. Cole studied Amanda's face, seeing not fear but hope. She wasn't there to expose him. She was there to hire him. "Assuming your theory is correct," Cole said carefully, "what exactly are you asking me to do?" "I'm asking you to give Derek Walsh the same justice you gave Ryan Hoffman and Tracy Mitchell." Cole leaned back in his chair, weighing his options. The smart move would be to deny everything and show her to the door. But something in Amanda's expression reminded him of Jessica Hoffman. The same cold determination, the same willingness to cross any line necessary to protect the people she loved. My rates are very high, Cole said finally. And my methods are comprehensive. I have money. My sister's life insurance policy paid out. Derek was listed as beneficiary, but I've managed to access some of it through legal challenges. Amanda's smile was bitter. It seems appropriate to use their money to fund their punishment. Cole quoted a figure that would have bought a luxury car. Amanda didn't even blink. Half now, half when the job is complete. The job will be complete when Derek Walsh no longer exists, Cole said bluntly. Are you prepared for what that means? I'm prepared for justice, whatever form that takes. 2 hours later, Amanda Foster left Cole's house with a handshake and a promise that Derek Walsh would be dealt with within 30 days. Cole watched her drive away, recognizing in her the same transformation he'd undergone 3 years earlier. She'd come to him as a grieving sister seeking help. She was leaving as a client who'd just commissioned a murder. The cycle was continuing, spreading outward like ripples in a pond. Cole Mitchell, who'd once believed in law and order, had become something that existed beyond both. And instead of feeling remorse for what he'd become, he felt only a professional satisfaction at having found his true calling. The hunter had evolved beyond the need for legal justification. He'd become an apex predator in an ecosystem where justice was a commodity and mercy was a luxury no one could afford. That night, as Cole began researching Derek Walsh's habits and vulnerabilities, he thought about the man he'd been before the waiter's warning changed everything. That man would have been horrified by what Cole had become. But that man had also been naive enough to trust a wife who was planning to dissolve him in acid. Some lessons could only be learned once. And some lines, once crossed, made it impossible to find your way back to who you used to be. Cole Mitchell no longer wanted to find his way back. The view from the other side was much clearer, and the work was infinitely more satisfying. In the end, he discovered that forgiveness was indeed a luxury, one that his enemies could no longer afford. Justice, it turned out, was just another word for consequences. And consequences, properly applied, were permanent. The phone rang. Another potential client. Another story of betrayal and system failure. Another opportunity to balance the scales in ways the law never could. Cole answered on the second ring. Mitchell Investigations. How can I help you achieve closure?